find the thing within yourself that you really want to make and then figure out the most creative way to make it. And that's also probably the more fun way to make it too. We made this the way that we make everything. We paid people and we treated people really well, and we tried to keep the days not shooting 14 hours and running people ragged. But it was a lot of our friends making this movie together, this community that we keep coming back to. If we can shoot like an entire season for the cost of a low budget feature and give, networks 6 hours of content instead of 2 hours of content, like maybe it makes financial sense.
Welcome to We Interrupt This Broadcast. My name's Robbie Miles, and I'm here today with filmmaker Alexander Jeffery. Alexander is a writer, director, producer, now based in Shreveport, Louisiana, where he co-owns the production company Bespoke Works LLC with his friend and longtime collaborator Paul Petersen. And in 2015, they made a short film, The Bespoke Tailoring of Mr. Bellamy, which won the $50,000 grand prize at the Louisiana Film Prize. His first feature film, A Chance Encounter, was released by Samuel Goldwyn Films after winning the Audience Choice Award at the Heartland Film Festival in 2020. He's the producer on The Twin on Shudder, and we're also going to talk a little bit about his indie TV pilot as well. What I want to focus on today is building and sustaining a career when working regionally or outside of a major hub, because you've had a really interesting trajectory with that. What was the catalyst for you in moving back to where you'd grown up in El Dorado?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was graduating college, I went to the University of Nebraska, and I thought, you had to move to one of the major hubs when you graduated. It was like pretty much choosing between New York, Chicago, and LA. And I packed my car up and I moved to Los Angeles because that's what you're supposed to do. I learned pretty quickly that it was a very hard place to get stuff made when you don't have any money. And it was a challenging place to really find a community and make movies with friends, which is what I was used to doing in film school and in Nebraska, because Nebraska is a very easy place to shoot low budget, no budget movies. And my little group of film school graduates, we loved doing that together. We shot a super low budget feature film pretty recently after we graduated, and we made lots of shorts together. And so that's what I was used to. And when I moved out to LA, I just felt like, I hit this just roadblock, and it felt like all the momentum just kind of grinded to a halt. I worked on this feature film called The Philosopher King in Sweden, and that was really kind of like film school 2.0 for me. My film school, I did learn a lot, but I didn't know how a proper feature set was supposed to run. And I didn't really ever have an experience where like every single crew member was doing their individual task. A lot of it was like we wear multiple hats and we just roll up our sleeves and we just do the thing. So that Sweden experience for me was really kind of eye-opening and invigorating in a lot of ways creatively. And so when I got back from Sweden, I moved back in with my parents in El Dorado, Arkansas. And there were some cool things going on in El Dorado at the time. My friend Laura Barrow was starting the El Dorado Film Festival, which I got involved in, and now I'm the executive director of. And so it just kind of made a lot of sense to land where I grew up and, again, be in a place where it's possible to make really low budget indie films and even continue to work with my friends in New York and LA and bring them to El Dorado, but also to engage the locals around me.
The projects that you've worked on, they're very closely linked to who you are as a person. And that seems to have been what has attracted collaborators that you've worked with over and over again. So what I want to ask you there is about the values alignment that you felt or misalignment that you felt in LA and how that's different working in El Dorado and with the group you're working with now.
I'm kind of one of those people that when for better or for worse, I'm not saying this is a good trait, but when I get an idea and I'm excited about it, like I will do everything I can to will it into existence. And, the stuff that I'm interested in creatively, I guess tends to be maybe a little bit more mainstream and is in that like kind of more feel good, less cynical space. I see it as my goal as an artist is to put some good into the world, right? Is to share these stories that can make people feel hopeful and inspired. And that's kind of where I'm coming from creatively. And I don't know that it's necessarily on purpose, but the people that I have kept working with are in alignment with that in some way, even though they may go off and tell stories in different capacities on their own. I think there is some like cohesion and some overlap there. I don't know that it's in anything in particular that I've done to foster that as it's just gravitating towards these things and other people gravitating with me.
Reminds me of what Dan Harmon said about his mother when he got lost in the supermarket. She said, "Don't come looking for me because I'll be looking for you and we might never find each other." Whereas if he just stays in his lane and does the thing that he does, hopefully that'll draw collaborators to him. So how did you find Paul, for example, or Joel Froome, the cinematographer, and how have you nurtured those connections over this time?
Yeah, so Paul actually is one of the gems from living in Los Angeles that short time that I did. Our mutual friend, Rachel Emerson, introduced us, but it was really that first El Dorado Film Festival where I knew Paul had made a really cool movie that I liked and again, kind of aligned with my tastes of putting some good into the world. We invited that film to screen at the first festival and they ended up winning Best of Fest that year. And that was kind of the moment when we realized that creatively we were pretty aligned in the stories that we wanted to tell. And I never had seen myself as a very good writer, and that was kind of what Paul's focus was. And so I was like, let's make something together. There's this competition in Shreveport. They say they're giving away 50 grand. It could be bullshit. I don't know, but let's try. And so that's when we made the Bespoke Tailoring of Mr. Bellamy. And amazingly enough, we were able to start our company. So that was cool.
And was that the first time you'd worked with that cinematographer, Joel Froome, as well?
So Joel, actually, I met him doing that show in Sweden, and I was the first AD on that. And that was one of those moments where, I'd been on student film sets and I'd looked at the monitor and thought I knew what a good image was. And then I got on that set in Sweden and I saw what a real cinematographer could do when they were framing up an image. Man, you guys pump out some really good cinematographers. Like those Australian DPs they're solid.
My friend Rachel put that down to the light here being so harsh that they've got to work extra hard to soften it and make it beautiful.
Totally. And so like looking at the monitor on set, I was like, man, I've got to work with this guy. Like I got to somehow convince this guy that my crappy little movies are worth coming to El Dorado and working on. Over 10 years later, we're still working together and we just shot this indie TV pilot.
That's tremendous. And so the Louisiana Film Prize, it's $50,000. I mean, that's a massive amount for a short film, but what did you do with that prize?
Beyond the money component of it, it was the first time that many people had seen my work in one given weekend. And so the people coming up to you and like engaging with your film, and it's like, this is why we make movies, is to reach an audience and like to have this sort of mini theatrical opening weekend of your short film. But, we basically were like, okay, we have this $50,000 and we want to keep working together. Let's start a company. And so we named our company after our first short film together. I think the biggest thing that money gave us, and I don't know if this totally answers your question, beyond starting that company and maybe in investing in a little bit of gear, is I think it sort of turned the tables for us in terms of credibility. People that were in my life and sort of on the edges of my life, all of a sudden this felt like a real thing to them. And I think it gave us that credibility when talking to investors to say, hey, we want to make our first feature film. We need $150,000. It's like, oh, well, he made $50,000 making a short with a feature. Maybe he could make more. And so I think that really was a turning point for me. It gave me a confidence that I hadn't had before too. Not in like a boastful way, but just in like, okay, I can take myself seriously as an artist now. Like, yeah, I make movies and, you guys should get involved and have fun with us.
When you said you invested in some gear, what was that first year like and what did that gear enable you to do? Because I know that you were doing some commercial work, like, commercials for a local sporting goods store and other places.
Yeah. So we had better equipment to then go out and shoot these commercials locally. I kind of by accident fell into this, corporate commercial world. I needed to pay some bills and I'm only good at a few things. So I was like, hey, I'll make a, little commercial for your business. And the fun thing that the Sports Alley commercials, which you're referring to with the local sporting goods store, they just kind of gave me free reign creatively. They were like, do whatever you want. And they weren't paying very well, but it was a really fun time for me to be like, okay, I'm going to make a little bit of money and I'm just going to be creative. And I really got to find my voice creatively in the commercial world because they just gave me free reign to do whatever I wanted. When we initially set up Bespoke, we weren't thinking this was going to be our livelihood. And as we did work and as word of mouth kind of got around, it was like, hey, we need a video. You're the only guy here that does this. What do you charge? And eventually we were like, oh God, we got to come up with money numbers that we charge people and what our day rate is and all this kind of stuff. It kind of happened by accident. And then we've been really more deliberate with kind of building that business, I would say in the last 5 to 7 years. Yeah.
And I think it's really important to consider how entrepreneurial as a producer and creator you need to be and what's going to feed the core business. And give you the space to work creatively and freely on the projects that are important. But also, I think you have really strong commercial instincts when it comes to your films. In developing further work, be that commercial work or further short films or features, you've had a lot of success with festival audiences like the Heartland Film Festival for A Chance Encounter. How does your development process and your financing process take into account, that audience strategy?
I wish that I was more strategic about it. For me, I am big about making movies that I want to see. And I think that's kind of the best advice that I've ever received. Just because you hear that, my films are maybe hard on their sleeve and more commercial, if that's not true to you, who you are as an artist, like, don't go try to make those films to make money, because there'll be a disconnect in the artist and the art. And so for me, it's just like, I've got to chase the thing that I'm really excited about at the moment. And I do make movies for audiences. I do love that feeling of sitting in a theater and, that feeling like you're going to throw up, like, oh my God, they're actually going to watch what I just made and it's probably terrible. But then, like, when they laugh at the right spot and they, clap at a moment, like, there is not a better feeling than that, than just sitting in the back and watching an audience watch your movie when it's working. And, I do believe that those audience awards at festivals are ultimately more important to distributors, because ultimately these things are for an audience. So I think when you do win that audience award, or, the audience recognizes the work, there is some validation in that. I always say, like, even if my movies just reach one person in a really interesting and profound way, like, it will have totally been worth making it. And I've definitely had that. I've had people reach out on Instagram and say they, bawled their eyes out on this thing, or this really affected the way that they view the world. Even just reaching those few individuals is really meaningful to me.
As a festival executive director yourself, and having had that experience in room seeing your films affect an audience, that's got to affect your practice as a filmmaker, to go like, okay, I can understand better how that beat's going to land.
Totally. And I will say, like, the best thing about running a film festival, at least in the early days, it's almost like getting to watch auditions as an actor. I got to sit in the audition room one time because I was doing a little documentary about the making of this play, and I got to watch other actors audition. And I went, oh my God, like, yeah, I don't need to be this freaking nervous when I audition, because they're literally looking for the right person. Like, they want you to succeed up there so badly. And, like, they have a specific thing in mind, and it doesn't mean that the thing you're doing is bad. It's just not what they're looking for. And it's like, film festivals are the same way, right? You can learn so much from watching what is submitted to a festival, and, like, really learn as a filmmaker, okay, I'm seeing a lot of really sad dramas about moms with Alzheimer's, or, whatever it may be. But, like, you see these patterns of, like, okay, a lot of people are doing this, and this is becoming maybe a little bit cliche. And you can start to avoid those patterns and kind of figure out how to stand out in a selection process. I know there's tons of great festivals in Australia. Go be a screener at one of these festivals if you can, because just seeing what's out there and what other people are making will all of a sudden get your brain working in a different way.
There's a strong difference when you're watching a film that seems to be chasing an audience, or I'm doing the thing that I think people want to see, versus I've got something really unique and important to me that I want to express. How do you protect that in making your work? Say a distributor or someone that you're working with is like, hey, this is great, but it'll be more commercial if you do X.
I've been on the other end of those distributor phone calls where it's like, hey, we're changing the title of your movie, and I have no negotiating power. You either want distribution or you want to protect the title of your movie. And it's ultimately like, we want these movies to find an audience, so we're not going to let our egos and what the title is get in the way of that. But I think, going to your point of, you see people trying to do the thing that they think people want, to me, it goes back to, like, if it's not coming from within, if it's not something that you're super excited about, and you're chasing this thing that you're excited about, like, it's going to feel false. And I think that does even translate over to advertising. I know more and more companies are leaning into a lot more gritty ad campaigns and stuff that feels less refined and less polished and less, like, we're trying to sell you something, because I think audiences are smart and they can really feel that. I don't know if it's like a collective human consciousness thing, but there's more of a push for authenticity and just truly, like, hey, this is who I am. This is what really excites me, and I hope you like it. I just watched this movie on Netflix, People We Meet on Vacation, and it's like kind of a pretty traditional rom-com, but man, I loved it. I found myself, like, smiling through the whole thing and, like, really engaged as an audience member. And I was like, yeah, I like movies like that. They're not for everybody, but man, they're really for me. And so I think it's just like finding that thing that's really for you.
Yeah, and I think the hardest thing is finding and connecting with that audience, because you want the people who go, wow, and we all know this when we feel it, someone made this movie for me, and I'm going to show this movie to people I love, and they're going to understand me better because I say like, hey, watch this. This says something about me or my lived experience. With this indie TV pilot, what's your distribution strategy for it? Because the gap between filmmaker and audience has never been smaller, but what is more vital than anything is different ways for producers to make their content and get it to an audience and then hopefully have sustainable careers out of it.
It's actually kind of an interesting story because it's based on a novel called Fixation that was written by my oral surgeon, the guy that removed my wisdom teeth, Dr. Steve Smart. He wrote this novel very much based on true experience that happened to him in the 1990s on a military base in Kansas. And, it's fabricated to a degree and fleshed out dramatically. So it's more inspired by true events than like truly factual events. But Paul and I got this novel, and from the time that both of us read the novel, we were like, this needs to be TV. The problem is that neither one of us know, like that felt like the gatekeeper world still. Like, what are we going to do? Put it on YouTube?
You have a camera, you have friends, but what you don't have is a TV network.
Right. And it's like, and Netflix feels a little unattainable. And, like it just felt like this world of like, okay, we're not sure what we're doing there. So then we wrote it as a feature. It never felt right. It never felt cohesive in the way that I thought it would as a TV show. And then I had some friends. One of my producing partners, Brittany Fallow, is based in New Orleans, and her business partners, Nick Logan and Bridget Reagan, they got together and they shot this indie TV pilot called Savage. And that sort of like lit a spark in me. I was like, oh, we got to do this indie TV. And then I started to hear about, Mark Duplass and Jay Duplass doing Penelope as an indie TV thing. And then I'm starting to see like all of these festivals have indie TV categories that's like a totally new thing. And I'm like, let's try it. And Nick and Bridget and Brittany's kind of model is if we can shoot like an entire season for the cost of a low budget feature and give, networks 6 hours of content instead of 2 hours of content, like maybe it makes financial sense. I kind of feel like we're in the Wild West a little bit. Like I don't know that it's going to work, which is really exciting in a lot of ways. It's like, this is kind of scary and kind of neat, but because Nick and Bridget are actors and all of their friends are excited to work on, cool stuff, like they were able to rally the troops and get us some amazing actors to come out to Shreveport and be in this thing that are on TV shows as like series regulars, on major networks and on Netflix and that kind of thing. And we're going to take it to festivals. And so I'm just excited. I'm like totally a newbie in this world, but I'm very excited to kind of dig in. And I'm really proud of the pilot that we made. I kind of like poo-pooed YouTube earlier, but YouTube's becoming much more of a viable place to actually distribute your content and get straight to the audience, right? And, you brought up something earlier too that made me think about Dust. And like that was a kind of an aha moment for me as well when Memoir got put on Dust and it reached this audience that was hungry for this type of movie. And I was like, man, when you find your audience, like, you feel it because they will comment and they will engage. And it was a really interesting moment for me. And so I'm hoping we can have that moment with this indie TV thing, because I do think it's super marketable. It's a military courtroom thriller. And again, made by people and not machines. Maybe there's an audience for it. I'm so curious about this model because I do think there's a market for this kind of stuff. And maybe there's a world where you can like sell these things, pretty cheaply, like, lower cost than you would pay for a movie online and reach the audience directly. We're kind of exploring a lot of different ideas. And the fallback is like, okay, if nobody wants the series and this thing can't exist as a series for whatever reason, well, it's like, we got 6 hours of content. Let's find a good feature in the edit and like at least get that out there, right? Because we know how to do that. But also like Amazon, you can just kind of upload things yourself. Maybe you just put the 6 episodes on Amazon and see how they do.
You touched on Dust, and I think this is important to explain to the audience here. Dust, who are a YouTube channel who were putting sci-fi short films up on YouTube as a bit of a proving ground for them and proving an audience for them as potential feature material. So Alex has a feature project called Memoir, gorgeous time travel short film with a feature script to go with it. So there was the credibility of getting on a recognized channel that already had a platform and already had viewers who were predisposed to this sort of content.
What I do think that Dust proves is like you said, they had a dedicated audience as a platform. Shudder is a good example of this on the horror side of things. They have a platform that is totally reaching and serving a very specific niche audience. And like, who's to say there can't be a sci-fi version of that or a feel-good, heartfelt version of that? I'm going to be really curious if more niche platforms like that appear over the next couple of years, like the Shutters and like the Screamboxes and Cineverses. The horror world is doing really unique things that I think maybe the rest of the film industry could pick up on. And Dust really was the catalyst for me sort of recognizing that as like, okay, they're when you build it, they will come. If there's a big fandom for it, you just have to foster that audience. I can't say how they did that because I don't know, but they did a really good job of it.
And I think a lot of that is probably in that curation, and that credibility. We've got great sci-fi shorts. If you want to watch great sci-fi shorts, come here. And I think they have Ether as their horror version as well. Going back to Shudder in particular, I'd love to hear about the journey of The Twin to distribution, because like you said, horror has a hardcore audience. So The Twin started life as a great short film called Hangman. It was developed as a feature script based on that. What can you tell me about the journey of the audience for the short all the way to it being released on Shudder?
The short film got picked up by platforms like Bloody Bites and got released on Blood Disgusting and had a nice festival run. I wasn't really involved in the short, besides being a fan of Colby and Taylor and their work. I think the story of The Twin getting made is kind of a story of just how I'm, seeing creative life in general. You just never know how the connections along the way are going to loop back around or come about. I was in an acting class in Los Angeles with this really wonderful actor named Logan Donovan. And when we were getting casting going for The Twin, I reached out to my friend Abby, who's an actor in Los Angeles, and she was a University of Nebraska alumni. And she was like, man, I can't do this right now because I have a lot of she was on an Apple TV show shooting in Vancouver at the time. And she was like, but Logan would kill this role. You need to talk to Logan. And I was like, oh my God, I was in acting class with Logan, and he read the script and he loved it. He became a big champion for it, and helped us find investors. And we just kind of built this team as we went of people that were really passionate about the material and about getting this thing made. We made this the way that we make everything. We paid people and we treated people really well, and we tried to keep the days, in a normal amount of time, not shooting 14 hours and running people ragged. But it was a lot of our friends making this movie together. This community that we keep coming back to, that got to know each other through Film Prize, through working on each other's shorts, through helping each other out. And that's something that I also wanted to touch on that we kind of brushed earlier, which is they're giving away 50 grand. You'd think that this would be like a really cutthroat competition. Everybody would be at each other's backs and trying to sabotage other films. No, it's like the complete opposite of that. Everybody just wants to work, make cool shit. Whatever wins, we don't have any control over that. Celebrate that person, move on to the next year, make more stuff. And that's a good lesson for outside of the major market communities. It's like, use each other's talents, work together. Oh, there's no room for ego in this business. It's too small. And I think that's the way that the Twin ultimately got made. And we submitted to the big festivals, the South Bys and the Sundances, and we didn't get in. And I think that's important to talk about because it's like we had Robert Longstreet and we had, really solid actors, and we made a polished movie, and it was tight and good, and you still get no's, you still get rejections, no matter what you're doing. It's part of the process.
The short film path of it and the credibility of the actors that you got involved, and also, your long-standing relationship with a lot of them, did that reduce risk or give faith to people who were investing in the film?
I think so. And I think the other part of it too was that my first feature, Chance Encounter, we had paid back all the investors, and it was a lower budget, lower risk, but that was a big thing. And again, building that credibility from the $50,000 cash prize to paying back the investors on a $150,000 feature to making this thing that's a little bigger. Ultimately, a lot of the money came from Logan, the lead actor, and a friend that he had made who just believed in him as an actor. Maybe didn't even see the film as necessarily a good investment, but I'm investing in this this guy because he's good. And, I think that's important too, is like, you never try to sell film as a great investment, because people can make better money tons of other ways. It's like, do you want to be a part of something? Do you want to support us? There's a level of investing in the person as much as the project, and that was definitely true on The Twin.
It's like, well, no, it's not likely that anyone's going to get rich off that, big $100 million indie hit, but you can have a sustainable creative life, and you can pay back your investors, and you can pay yourself while you work on it. It's actually, this is a job, this is community work, and you keep building on that, which, you have beautifully over the last decade. So going back to what you're saying about festivals with The Twin, so you were getting rejections from festivals. What was the next step then? How did that lead to distribution on Shudder?
So we kept submitting to other festivals, and we ended up getting into Austin Film Festival, which is a festival that I've always wanted to be a part of. And that felt like a really big win for the project. And we brought on a sales agent. One of the actors in our film was repped by Gersh, which is an agency in Los Angeles. And there's a sales department there. And so we reached out to them, and they were willing to help us. And I think getting that credibility from Austin, and again, we won the Audience Horror Award in Austin. We got a conversation going with Vertical Entertainment, and they really liked the movie, and Shudder was looking at it on the side, and we ended up going with Vertical, and they continued to foster that relationship that we had started with Shudder, and got a deal for the film to be an exclusive on Shudder, which was really cool. And again, reaching directly to the audience that we wanted to reach. And you're right, they will not pull any punches, but it's like, that's part of the learning process too. And I'll take a negative review every day, because that means somebody watched the movie. For every negative review, there's also a positive one that it did work for somebody else. So that's part of the learning process, and it's cool to see.
It's like Elvis's manager was also selling I Hate Elvis badges, because why not get double the money? Thank you so much for joining me, Alex. We ask all of our guests this at the end of the episode, to share a big idea that can shape the future of the Australian screen industry. But we can talk internationally as well. So what's your big idea?
I actually think it just came to me. There's this great book that the Duplass brothers wrote together called Like Brothers. And in that, they tell the story of how they made this documentary for a company, and they got $100,000, and they made a feature film the way that you're supposed to make it, right? They got the money, they paid all the crew, they did the call sheets correctly, whatever. And they're in the editing room, and they're like, this sucks. It's bad. We have to bury this. And then they went out and made a way cheaper, gritty movie the way that they knew how to make movies. And they actually liked it. The thing started working. It clicked. It had their voice. And so I think maybe the big takeaway is that just because you get the money to make the thing the right way doesn't mean that that's the way the thing wants to be made. And with money comes pressure, and with money comes responsibility. And I feel like I'm quoting Spider-Man right now. But again, find the thing within yourself that you really want to make, and then figure out the most creative way to make it. And that's also probably the more fun way to make it too. The door closed can be the door open. I know that's a little trite and a little cliche, but like, just find a way to tell the story that you want to tell.
I think that's terrific advice. And it's exactly that. People will go out and shoot something on their phone that connects in such a way that catches fire online, because they've been authentic. They've said the thing they really want to say, and people care less about the quality and more about, the message and the work. So yeah, I think that audience connection and that trust in your own creative instincts is really important. Absolutely fantastic to see you, and look forward to speaking again soon.
Likewise. Thank you.
We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the
Gadigal people of the Eora Nation,
the Turrbal and Yagara people,
the Yugambeh language people, and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions.
Always was, always will be.